On January 2nd, 2021, then President Donald Trump and his White House placed a call to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger over the outcome of the Georgia 2020 presidential election results. You might remember that phone call. It went viral. A key part of that phone call, the then former president asking for over 11,000 votes out of the Secretary of State. Now, that call became a crucial part of Fulton County DA Fani Willis's investigation into whether Trump or any of his associates interfered with the election's outcome. Today, a grand jury is being seated in Atlanta. That grand jury likely going to end up being tasked with considering whether criminal charges are appropriate for the former president for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Now, welcome to the First Alert Desk. I'm Maria Moreau. We're going to get into a lot of what is happening today, the latest developments in this 2.5-year-long investigation from the Fulton County DA. And joining me now is attorney Jay Shipp, who is going to help me break down and understand what exactly is a grand jury and what it has to do with this current investigation that's really captured national attention. Welcome.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy you're here. You know, a lot of us follow this, and it's kind of hard to understand, exactly what is going on and follow the details of an investigation like this. But here we are today, a new grand jury being seated in Atlanta on something that is on a national level of interest. Let's start with the basics. What is a grand jury?
Alrighty, so let's go dive into it. A grand jury is usually comprised of about 23 people. 23 of those individuals vote on whether or not to move forward with charges. Now, in order to do that, 16 of those individuals must be present, and that's what you call a quorum. You must have a quorum to vote. And of those 16, 12 must agree to do what is called a true bill. A true bill means that, okay, we find that there is enough evidence to move forward with an indictment. Let's go ahead and move forward with these charges. They could also decide to do what is called a no bill. A no bill meaning that there is not enough evidence to move forward with these charges, and therefore we are going to decline to move forward with an indictment. If there is a no bill, the DA's office will have one more shot at it, but it will have to be with a different grand jury, and that grand jury will be picked at a later time. It can't be the same one.
Now, typically with these types of grand juries, this involves real people. So who exactly is eligible to be on a grand jury like this?
So you're going to have citizens from the Fulton County Metro. Usually it's from the people from that county wherever the grand jury is seated. So if it was Fulton, it would be Fulton County residents of age 18 years and older. If it was DeKalb, it would be the same thing. But what we're looking at is these people may come from all over the metro. I mean, you have people from Atlanta, you have people from as far north as Alpharetta, you have people from South Fulton. It's going to be a very diverse group of people, and it won't be one of those situations whereas the demographics of the grand jury all look the same, and what some people may believe would lead to a certain result.
And, when you say that, it sounds awfully like picking any other jury. Is there a specific difference between a grand jury and the normal jury process?
So, yeah, sure. A grand jury is one of those where the defense attorney is not necessarily in the process of picking that grand jury. These people are, sent letters, told that they have to come to be picked on this grand jury. And then if they don't have any hardships or anything like that, they are usually selected by the prosecution's office to be on this grand jury. When you're doing jury selection for a trial, both sides of the most sides of the court are on this selection, and that would be your prosecution and your defense. And they go through what is called voir dire. They ask certain questions. They try to weed out any individuals who may have biases against the client, implicit or explicit, and they try to almost game the system to try and pick the best jury that they think will help them out to get either not guilty or guilty, depending on which side they are on.
As we navigate this, an investigation, something we've been covering here locally for 2.5 years, this is very much still the beginning stage, just seating this jury and getting that process going. How long can we expect the grand jury to take to decide on that vote you mentioned at the start of this stream?
So a grand jury usually lasts for term of court, and that could be about 2 months. What may help this particular grand jury out is there was already a special grand jury convened, and they have already kind of given recommendations for charges. So this may be a way for them to sift through the evidence a little bit more and be able to see, okay, this is where we want to go. These are the charges we're looking at for these certain individuals. This is how we should, pretty much move forward with it. It may cut down on time that they have to speak to all these different witnesses that were called in for the special grand jury. So it could definitely speed things up. But of course, anybody who's ever practiced in Atlanta knows that Fulton County can move slow at times. So let's not hold our breath about it taking just a small amount of time.
And a lot of us would, want to be in that courtroom, be that fly on the wall to really understand what all goes into casting that decision. Based on your experience, could you tell us, what do those jurors look through? Is it transcripts, recordings? How far does this go? And what all information are they expected to receive as they do move through this process?
So as a third-year prosecutor down in Bibb County, I had the opportunity to present a number of indictments to a grand jury. And what a grand jury usually looks at is the testimony from the witnesses. Of course, in Bibb County, we didn't have cases of this stature. However, we did have some serious cases that came through, and it really relied on the testimony of the arresting officer or any supplemental witness that may come in, whether it be an investigator or anything like that. And they kind of have the opportunity to ask this person questions, kind of get a little bit of clarity on certain things, and move forward with that information. It's not one of those things where they're supposed to come in with this outside information and kind of figure out from there. It's more of here's what we've gathered, and from this information that we're presenting to you, you can either move forward with a true bill or no bill.
And a lot of people are focused on a key part of that phone call. That's really what most people are familiar with. That part where the former president on that call with Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger says, find 11,780 votes, or he asks him to just find those votes. Now, for those that don't know, that is the exact amount of votes, and if not a little more, needed to defeat Joe Biden in the state of Georgia, thus overturning the 2020 election into Donald Trump's favor. As a prosecutor, specifically as DA Willis, how much can we expect her to lean into that part of the phone call?
I think my personal opinion is that is a very important part of the phone call. It's not a vague suggestion such as, hey, you might want to recheck your numbers or anything like that. It is asking for a specific number, as you already stated, that would have put him over the threshold to defeat Joe Biden in the state of Georgia. And asking for that specific number and not necessarily saying, are you sure there isn't 11,000 missing or anything of that number or anything of that nature, but specifically asking for him to find those 11,780 votes, that speaks volumes. And if I were prosecutor for this case, I would definitely lean heavy into that, because it's showing that there was, in my opinion, intent to find that specific numbers, and therefore there's specific intent to try to, overturn this election, whether it be by fraud or by coercing the Secretary of State.
We're talking to attorney Jay Shipp on the currently being seated a new grand jury that could decide if charges should be made against Donald Trump in the 2020 election interference, specifically talking about a phone call that was made between the Secretary of State, or the former president and the Secretary of State, among other allegations of election interference in the 2020 election. Now, I want to, as we talk about this, emphasize that this is not an easy process to navigate, an easy decision to make as a member of this grand jury. This is a very historical moment, even. For the first time in American history, a Fulton County grand jury will examine whether to bring charges against a former president over alleged election interference. I mean, we say that, it sounds something straight out of a movie. Give us some context into the history of this and the magnitude of the situation.
I mean, this is one of those situations where it is something that has never happened. We're talking about, let's go all the way back to Watergate. I mean, that is the last time we've had a president being threatened with, major charges. And although, Roger Stone, who was a part of Donald Trump's inner circle at one time, had ties to Nixon, to think, way back in 2016 that this is how it would culminate here in 2023 with a grand jury being seated to actually look at pressing charges against a former president, it's mind-blowing, to be quite honest with you.
And a big question a lot of voters have out there, this is somebody who is running in the next presidential election. We can expect to see his face and his voice as he seeks out that power that he had through 2016 into 2020. If he is indicted, can he then still run for president?
Yes. If former President Trump is indicted, he still is allowed to seek election for president. And to be quite honest, I think this will kind of galvanize his supporters and actually push them forward in trying to get him elected. I don't see a bad thing for him in this whole fiasco. One thing about former President Trump is that he is a master of marketing. I mean, whether it be Trump steaks, Trump casinos, even now he's being able to, fundraise off of other indictments that he's gotten in New York and even the Department of Justice with their investigation. So I don't think this will be one of those situations where it tanks his campaign. I do believe that it will galvanize his supporters and push them to even push harder for him because they will feel like he's being unfairly persecuted. However, the evidence remains to be seen, and until we see that evidence, we won't know exactly what the Fulton County has against him other than the phone call. But, this is one of those situations where he will be able to continue on his run for president, and it may help him tremendously.
Yeah, in the past two and a half years that we've been following this is still very much just the beginning, and we'll continue to follow with our coverage. I want to point you to our website right now, where we have a full transcript of Donald Trump's call to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. If you wanted to read on that, jog your memory back to 2021, that is available for you, as well as in our free Atlanta News First app, so make sure you download that. We'll push out any major developments on this story directly to your phone so you can stay up to date. For now, Atlanta-based attorney J. Edward Shipp, thank you so much for your expertise coming on and talking about this with us. I know this is garnering a lot of interest, national interest even, so having an opportunity to break it down and really explain what's going on is very useful and helpful to our viewers, so appreciate having you here.
Hey, I appreciate being here, and I thank you for having me on.